I guess my question is, like, has MKF ever considered anything like this? Like, is somebody had to tweet, I just texted Drew Brees. He's good. He has not been kidnapped by a monkey.
I don't know. Brian, you want to
confirmed on the plans as of 2022.
Yeah. I mean, it's expensive. I get that.
Hey everyone, welcome into Monkey Knife Fight's NFL preview show, week 13 edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, the great Nick Whalen of Rotowire.com. Nick, what a week we have in front of us, man. A fantastic slate of games. It just keeps getting better until that Sunday night game. We might not talk about that one, but we'll see what happens. But we are also coming into this show fresh off of Trevor Lawrence's biggest game of his career. I mean, look at that hat. That is a sweet hat you got going on, man.
Thank you.
Celebrating all things Trevor Lawrence in the Jags. But I got to ask you, any correlation at all between Trevor Lawrence having his best game of his career and Jackson DeVille rocking the American flag Speedo the entire game?
Hey, you tell me. I think it's pretty easy to draw some parallels between those two events. Like you said, I think that was the best game and the best quarter, the fourth quarter, of course, of Trevor Lawrence's career. He's now strung together 3 consecutive, very good games in my eyes. One of those was a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, but Lawrence still played well in that game. You could argue that he had never even played back-to-back good games in his career, let alone 3 in a row. And for a season that, quickly got away from the Jags, they're, mathematically, I think they have like a 1% chance to make the playoffs in the AFC, but they're not going to make the playoffs. Once we kind of hit midseason and that reality became apparent, the number one thing I wanted to see is, okay, we need to see Trevor Lawrence start to look like at least something close to an elite quarterback here. And that's happened. I still am not convinced that he's on this Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow type of trajectory. I think we need a larger sample before we start throwing names like that around. But my evaluation of Trevor Lawrence right now compared to a month ago is night and day. So even though the Jags probably finished this season with like 6 or 7 wins, it kind of feels like a net victory if it feels like Trevor Lawrence took a big step forward.
Yeah, stock up big time. It is pointing up on Trevor Lawrence right now. Gutsy call by Doug Peterson to win that game with that 2-point conversion. But it's funny what happens, when you surround your young quarterback with competent coaching, unlike another team in the NFL, which we'll talk about in a minute. I do have a couple other topics that I want to talk about to start off the show. You see this whole thing with Drew Brees, struck by lightning, maybe not struck by lightning. I don't know what's going on. I think it's one of these other gambling companies doing some sort of a stunt. But nonetheless, we are talking about it. So Drew Brees is okay. It's been confirmed that was all a publicity stunt. But yeah, what do you think about the fake strike by lightning?
Yeah, just a classic marketing gag. We've seen this so many times over the years. You do the fake lightning strike. Hopefully it boosts your live betting. Obviously, it makes a ton of sense. No, I don't know what's going on here. I saw a tweet from Catherine Terrell, who's like the ESPN Saints reporter. She said, quote, "I just texted Drew Brees. He said he's good and that he did not get struck by lightning." Like, what a wild tweet without context. Like, this lady had to text Drew Brees to be like, "Hey, by the way, did you get struck by lightning last night?" And he'd be like, no, it was just a viral marketing stunt. Not really the greatest idea there. I mean, if the idea was to generate buzz, I guess they've done that. Everybody is basically saying that this sportsbook, which will remain nameless on this show, they're basically being shamed for it. But, the name is in the news. It could be an all press is good press situation. I guess my question is, has MKF ever considered anything like this? Like, is somebody had to tweet, I just texted Drew Brees. He's good. He has not been kidnapped by a monkey.
I don't know. Brian, you want
to confirm on the plans as of 2022.
Yeah. I mean, it's expensive. I get that.
It is. Absolutely. Speaking of going viral and trying to go viral or going viral for just the wrong reasons, a very popular topic and one of my favorite topics on this show is talking about Russell Wilson. It was the man's birthday this week. I don't know if you saw this, Nick, but
I did.
There's nothing cringier to me than the grown man birthday party, except when that grown man is Russell Wilson. He turned 34 on Tuesday night this week. I don't know why you're celebrating 34 in the middle of a season that's just going into the toilet. And it's just, you're already the laughing stock of the NFL. You got your teammates calling you out, like screaming in your face on the sideline a week ago. And now reports come out that your wife, who invites your entire team and only half of them bothered to show up. I don't get the grown man birthday party to begin with. Like, unless you're like Rob Gronkowski, then okay, sure. Like, Gronk's going to party, whatever. Let's go to that. But for Russell Wilson, man, what do you think about this?
So I don't necessarily have a problem with the party itself. I think when you're super rich, you could probably throw like a pretty cool party for just about anything, and people should show up. 34, the big 3-4, Ricky Williams year. I get it. It's a big one for Russell Wilson. I'm actually going to zag on this. Everybody's kind of dogging Wilson for half the team showing up. Half the team seems pretty good to me, right? I mean, you're talking probably that's like 25 plus guys showing up amid a season where Russell Wilson has completely embarrassed himself week after week. I think you should be glad that many people showed up.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe 25. I mean, he's batting 500 there at that point. Yeah, right. The Tuesday night, I don't know. I don't like the whole, especially when your season's just going so poorly and then having a middle of the week party. I just don't like the look at all. Especially like, what do you think that party was like? Think they all did some high knees, maybe a couple up downs? Like
I think like hyperbaric chambers, most likely, non like Bush NA, non-alcoholic beer, I would imagine was served at this party. It's almost like Russell Wilson lacks self-awareness in some ways.
Yeah, just a little bit. One more quarterback topic here for you, Nick. In Green Bay, is it Jordan Love's time? What's going on? Aaron Rodgers just casually revealing that he has a broken thumb last week, right before Thanksgiving, which unfortunately that happened right after we recorded our show. But yeah, what is going on in Green Bay?
I don't think it's going to be Jordan Love time quite yet. I do think we get at least 1 or 2 Jordan Love starts at the end of this season. I think Aaron Rodgers, believe it or not, is pretty strategic with how he reveals his injury news. This is not the first time we've seen something like this. I don't doubt that he's injured. I don't doubt that it's affecting his play. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, he's dealing with an avulsion fracture to that thumb. He picked up an oblique injury last week. Like I don't think he's like faking this by any means. I've seen a little bit of that. I just think he's very strategic about when he chooses to use it as an excuse to kind of justify his play. And for the most part, he's good about saying, look, if I'm out there, I got to be better. But he's not going out and talking about this after the game. He's revealing it at like a charity event, or he's talking about it on Pat McAfee. It always comes up in the context of, well, I am dealing with a broken thumb here. With that said, I think Rodgers is going to play. He loves playing the Bears. For the most part, all the messaging from the Packers has been that they're in lockstep with Aaron Rodgers. He seems to have a little bit more of a say in his status than the average player would. And his stance all along has been, look, if we're not mathematically eliminated, I'm going to play. So I think we see him play at least one more game. There's a chance they could be mathematically eliminated after this week. They have their bye in week, what must be 14. So at that point, I think it would maybe be a natural transition over to Jordan Love. But basically, it's whenever the Packers get eliminated, that's when I think we see Love for a couple games.
It's the whole like the extension of the buys and how late they've gone this year is like kind of throwing me off, because this past week 12, everybody played. So I'm like, okay, buys are done. We're back to 16 games a weekend. And now, like, I think Arizona's off this week. We got Washington.
Carolina's off this week too.
Well, I mean, they're off every week.
Yeah, well, true. Yeah, we got 6 teams on bye next week.
Yeah,
preposterous.
Yeah, in week 14, fantasy playoffs.
Too late.
Yeah, exactly. Did you happen to watch the Thursday night game this week? Because I think now all of America has a very good idea of just the incompetency that is going on at one Patriot place in Foxborough, Massachusetts with the coaching staff, which is something I thought I would never say as long as Bill Belichick was still in charge. But what they have done, especially on the offensive side with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, letting them run this offense has just completely ruined their second-year quarterback. You talk about Trevor Lawrence earlier, starting to show signs of maybe becoming that elite guy. Mac Jones was the best rookie of that whole group last year, and now he looks like, well, he's not very good at all. And if it wasn't for Zach Wilson being a nightmare, Mac Jones, would be by far and away the worst quarterback from that first round a year ago. But like the offense, it's uncoordinated. Nick, the third play of the game, it looks like the quarterback and the running back don't even know if they're on the same page. You got Ramondre Stevenson, look like he's running a stretch run. Mac Jones looks like he wants to run a play action. Then last minute, he tries to hand it off. Fumble. That entire sequence when they got that gift at the end of the first half, Josh Allen fumbles. Patriots get the ball at like the 42, and they have a minute and a half, 2 timeouts. They start running. They run a 14-yard play, a 9-yard play. Then it's 2nd and 2, and all of a sudden, okay, timeout, quarterback sneak, run it into the line, timeout. Just absolutely no coordination at all going on with the New England Patriots. And it's just a joke. And then in the second half, they were calling the game like they just didn't want to get blown out or embarrassed. But I think they embarrassed themselves in the process. And now everyone can see it, and they know that they're a joke.
Yeah, it's shocking. to see from the Patriots. Some of the mistakes that this team makes. I think last week it was even more apparent on Thanksgiving. Giving up a kick return. Having special teams mistakes. The PIs have been a problem for them this season. They're jumping off sides, things that you just don't associate with the New England Patriots. There's something that we haven't associated with that franchise for 20 years. It really does seem like not having elite quarterback play has just caused this ripple effect through the rest of the offense and the rest of the franchise, where they're just shockingly average. And look, Mac Jones played really, really well, I thought, 2 weeks ago in Minnesota. I was curious to see if he could carry that over to last night's game. And, they got off to a nice start. I thought Mac came out confident. They had the long touchdown, a very Patriots way to score with a defensive back in at receiver. That kind of felt like an old school Patriots move. They're off and running. And then after that, just death on offense, back to back. I think they went 3 straight 3-and-outs after that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Very nearly had a safety, probably should have had a safety. They're backed up against their goal line. And to me, they don't really adjust based on situation or opponent. If you're playing the Buffalo Bills, maybe the second or third or possibly first best team in the NFL, you need to be more aggressive. You need to go into that game realizing the situation. You're not the better team. You need to catch some breaks. You need to manufacture some big plays, or you're not winning that game. And they pulled out their most conservative game plan of the year. It's so weird to watch. They just kind of think, I was telling you, before the show started, they play every series and every quarter as if there's no context around it at all.
Yeah, it's almost like a defensive coach is calling their plays and running their offense. Almost like that. But you have Al Michaels basically just openly mocking the Patriots in their use of timeouts. Here's the quote: "We're used to seeing such judicious use of timeouts by New England. That was very odd. Not in New England." Kirk Herbstreit just giggling alongside as Al was just picking on him. One small victory though for the Patriots last night. They did force the Bills to punt a few times. First time in 10 quarters that they had forced Buffalo to punt. So there you go. You got that going for you.
Yeah.
And then the Marcus Jones thing too. Neat, cool little play. It worked. You got a touchdown. But at the same time, I'm wondering, where's Tyquan Thornton, the guy you drafted in the second round, who's supposed to be blazing speed? Why isn't that him out there? You finally saw him in the fourth quarter, so I don't know if he's in someone's doghouse. But the Patriots have become the team that everyone in New England used to make fun of for the past 20 years. Just idiots. Look at these guys. And now the Patriots are doing those things. And I think Robert Kraft and ownership needs to step in the offseason and do some sort of reshuffling, reorganizing of the front office and the coaching staff. Maybe bring Bill O'Brien back. That's where I would start. But anyways, moving on. A fantastic slate in the NFL this weekend. Let's start off with the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson is back. It will be the first time in exactly 700 days that he is playing in an NFL game, Nick. 240.5 is his line on MKF this weekend. What do you think we see out of Deshaun?
I really like the less on 240.5. I think we have to consider the context that Deshaun Watson will have not played in a real regular season NFL game in exactly 700 days come Sunday. That is a very long time. That's got to be up there for longest gaps ever between NFL starts. I don't know what we'd have to look back at how much time Michael Vick missed, but it's got in that same type of context. And Deshaun Watson, when he was right before everything happened in Houston, was a borderline to, kind of back end of the top 5 quarterback in the NFL. So we know that's there. I don't doubt that could come back at some point, but I don't think we see it this year. It's just too much of a gap. Too much has happened. This game is in Houston. Of course, that's the game that he's eligible to come back for. If you just kind of take all that out of it and look at it just from a football perspective, it's an awesome matchup, right? I mean, this game has a high total. I think the expectation is that Cleveland's going to move the ball, but I think they're going to do it on the ground. This is not a good Houston rush defense. This is not a good Houston defense whatsoever. It's a team that basically everybody's been able to build a lead against and then just kind of sit on the rest of the game. And that's exactly what the Browns are built to do. So I could see Watson coming out playing well in the first quarter, but I don't think this is a game where the Browns want to put Deshaun Watson in and have him air it out. I think this is a ease him back in type of game, ride Nick Chubb to a victory. You should be able to win this game, even if Deshaun Watson struggles. But yeah, 240.5 is just too high for me. I don't really think they're going to ask him to do a ton to really put this team on his back in his first game back against the Houston Texans.
So let's bounce around the rest of the early window games, Nick. Let's kind of do a half speed round here, kind of go through here some great matchups in the 1 o'clock window. Let's start with the Commanders at the Giants. Great running back matchup. Saquon Barkley, 78.5 rushing yards for Saquon.
Let's see. I think I'm going to go less here. I think I'm going to put my faith in that Washington defensive front, which has been really, really good of late, and could get Chase Young back this weekend. Even if that's the case, I don't know that he plays a ton of snaps, but still, I mean, that is an ultra elite defensive end when he's healthy. I haven't seen him in a long time. And, it kind of feels like these teams are having opposite seasons where, Washington got off to this terrible start. Now they're red hot. The Giants were red hot early on. Nobody ever really fully bought in, and now they seem to be falling back down to earth. They have injuries all over the offense. The offensive line is still banged up. I think that's going to be a huge issue in this game. I mean, there's a reason the Giants are 2.5-point dogs at home to the Commanders. I mean, a couple weeks ago, that would have seemed insane, but that's kind of where these teams are. And I think Washington's really going to be able to sell out to stop Saquon Barkley. So it's probably another frustrating day for Saquon. I'll go less on 78.5.
Washington's become really interesting, like really quickly. And Taylor Heinicke, I saw that line. He's like 11-1 in his career against the spread too, or 10-2, something like that. He's very, very good against the spread in his career if you're going the gambling route. But let's talk about Brian Robinson and his giant hat. I love that the giant hat has become a thing, by the way. I think it's pretty funny.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great post-game photo last week. 65.5 rushing yards for Robinson.
Let's go more here. I think this Giants defense has become a lot more exploitable due in part to injuries. And last week, I thought was the first week that Brian Robinson looked like the same guy from the preseason. I think he got off to a slow start, I think for obvious reasons after missing time. But he was running really, really hard last week, just bowling over tacklers. And I think he can do that again against the Giants. So I think this is a pretty friendly number for the big hat man himself. I'll go more on 65.5.
All right, moving on. Let's head to the Jets-Vikings game. The GOAT, Mike White, taking over, slinging it all over the field. 240 passing yards, more or less for Mike White. And are you on the train for Mike White to be the Jets quarterback going forward?
I think I am just by default because I don't think it should be Zach Wilson, and the other option's Joe Flacco. So, barring like pulling Byron Leftwich out of retirement to take over the job, I think he's kind of the lesser of three evils. This number is low enough, and I think the Vikings are going to be able to score on this Jets defense as good as it is. I mean, we saw them put up a ton of points on New England last week. I'm going to go more on 240.5, but I would also go more on 0.5 interceptions, or maybe even 1.5 interceptions for Mike White, because I still don't know that we got a fair evaluation of Mike White last week. I think if I'm Zach Wilson sitting there, frowning in my hoodie on the sidelines, I'm thinking, look, like you pulled me after we played New England, Buffalo, New England, and Denver in 4 straight games. And now this guy gets to come in and play the Bears defense. Chicago's defense, we really cannot overstate how bad it is. Their 3 best defensive players were either traded or injured. They lost Eddie Jackson in that game last week. So yes, Mike White looked really good. Yes, he did it, with the elements. So you give him some credit for that, but I want to see it, against the defense that's not the Chicago Bears. So I'm treading lightly with the Jets this week.
I'm going to go more on this one. I mean, the Vikings defense is average at best, and they just allowed Mac Jones to throw for over 300 yards with how bad the Patriots offense is. So I think Mike White can get to 241 on Sunday. We got a great wide receiver cornerback matchup in this one. Justin Jefferson. I would think we're going to see Sauce Gardner on him all day long, but JJ's line 88.5.
Just got to go more by default. All due respect to our guy Sauce, but I mean, Jefferson this year kind of feels like he's gone up another level. And Jefferson, Chase, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. Cooper Kupp, I guess, when healthy. When they're in that mix, Tyquan Thornton. Yeah. That's kind of that tier 1 of wide receivers. But I think when it comes to contested catches, like Justin Jefferson is on his own level at this point. I mean, it's like catches that feel like they have like a 30% completion chance for other elite receivers are like 90% for him. I mean, it is wild. Like some of the catches he had against New England on Thanksgiving, just total bailouts on 3rd and longs. I mean, people overuse the term, he's a cheat code. Jefferson really does feel like a cheat code at times.
Yeah, I like the more. I don't have any reason to go against it. Moving on.
Yeah,
yep, let's just move right on. Titans and Eagles, AJ Brown revenge game. 79.5 receiving yards for AJB on Sunday, more or less.
I guess I'll go more here. It's a relatively friendly number. He's got to hang out of the ball. AJ Brown had a key fumble last week against Green Bay. The Eagles have just been sloppy in general these last few weeks, but I do think this is a relatively good spot for them. They are at home. We know Tennessee more than maybe any other team is going to keep these games close, even if they're overmatched talent wise. Like they always find a way to grind these out and make it a 1-score game, but they've also lost to pretty much every good team they played this year. Like all their wins have come against average to well below average teams. And yeah, they've kept it close against teams like Kansas City and Cincinnati. But they haven't been able to actually win those games. So I'm really interested to see if they can actually do this one on the road. But either way, I think this is AJ Brown seems like the type of guy that would really want to have a revenge game against the Tennessee Titans. So obviously it's more up to Jalen Hurts getting him the ball, but that has not really been a problem this year. So I'll go more on that 79.5.
Do you buy the Eagles as Super Bowl contenders, like legit? Or
I do. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think part of it is the path in the NFC is just not that tough, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's like, can you beat Dallas? I think they can. Can you beat Minnesota? Yes. Tampa Bay's 5-6 right now. And, San Francisco, when they're rolling, that's a scary team. But, I think if you're Philly, you kind of feel like you've built a similar type of team to San Francisco. And I think you feel like you have pretty similar talent across the board, and you probably have an advantage at quarterback. So yeah, I absolutely buy Philly as a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah. San Francisco is the one team, like if I had to rank who I would think would come out of the NFC as of right now, San Francisco at full health is my number one ahead of anybody else.
Well, I do think like their best game is maybe better than anybody else's, but they've also had the easiest schedule in the league so far. And a big part of that is the NFC West, just not being as good as we thought. The Rams especially, they played at Denver earlier this year, and actually ended up losing that game somehow.
Yeah.
That was a 10-11 game.
How could we forget?
But yeah, right, exactly. But you look at their wins, like they beat Seattle in week 2. That was Seattle coming down off the Denver game in week 1. They've beat the Rams. They beat the Panthers. They beat the Rams again. They beat the extremely banged up Chargers, the Colt McCoy Cardinals, and the New Orleans Saints. They truly don't have an impressive win on the resume. They're going to have a chance to get it though on Sunday afternoon. We'll say that against Miami. But even the rest of the schedule is pretty soft. Like they play Tampa in week 14. After that, it's Seattle, Washington, Vegas, Arizona. So like it's just not a team that I think is going to be really all that tested throughout the regular season. And, the last time they played a team like Miami, it was, they were home for Kansas City back in, what was that, like week 8, and, played a good first half, got blown off the field in the second half.
True. And we'll get to the Niners Dolphins in just a second. Let's head back to this Titans Eagles game. Derrick Henry, 85.5 rushing yards, more or less.
Oh boy. Well, I'm going to go more here. It almost kind of feels like he's due for one of these games, and that could be dangerous when you're trying to project players based on that kind of narrative. But for the most part, he's been bottled up over the last 3 weeks. I mean, he had a great run from weeks 4 through 9, where he was easily clearing 100 yards every week. Did get to 87 yards against Green Bay, but needed 28 carries in that game to get to 87 yards. I mean, he has only 178 total yards over the last 3 games. I have been getting him more involved, catching the ball out of the backfield. That's been interesting. But, for as good as this Eagles defense is, they can be exploited on the ground. So with Henry, you're looking for one of those big, like 30, 40-yard runs. And then, the rest of the day he's just churning out 3 to 5 yard carries to get you there. So I'll go more on Henry.
All right, very good. Let's head to that late window. We got the Dolphins and Niners. San Francisco is favored by 4 points in this matchup. The over-under 46.5. Tua Tagovailoa, 269.5 passing yards is the more or less for Tua. He's thrown for 266 or more in 6 of 9 games, including each of the last 4. The Dolphins, they're flying high heading into this one, scoring 30 or more points in each of the last 4 games. But San Francisco does have the number 1 defense when it comes to total yards, and they're number 11 against the pass, allowing just 202 per game. What do we see out of Tua on Sunday?
I respect the San Francisco defense a ton. They've gone 4 straight games, not allowing points in the second half. That's extremely impressive. I think this is a pretty friendly number, though, for an offense that on paper, I think feels like it should be able to run the ball, like, kind of improved at that position. That has not been the case. They really weren't able to move it on the ground very much at all against Houston. That's concerning. So even if you like the 49ers to win this game, I think this is a pretty easy more for me because if in that scenario, the Dolphins are trailing, they're going to be throwing more than ever. And even if you think Tua maybe struggles, I think asking him to get close to 300 yards in this game, if he's chucking it a ton in the second half, really isn't too much to ask. And we saw Patrick Mahomes go for over 400 passing yards on this 49ers defense. So it can be exploited. The biggest thing for me is, can the offensive line give Tua enough time to throw the ball? Like, no Teron Armstead for what's already a very shaky unit. That concerns me. I think there's a chance he could be under siege all afternoon, but if he's not, this is an easy more for me.
Yeah. And then, so if you're going to go easy more on Tua, Tyreek Hill's number 90.5. Yep. Already locking it in on the more.
Next question. 90.5. We're going more. Hill and Waddle, by the way, on track to become the first pair of teammates since, I think it was 2014, to both finish in the top 5 in total receiving yards.
Nice. I mean, they're so dynamic, and as someone who has both of them in different fantasy leagues, it drives me nuts when Sheffield or Schofield, whatever his name, gets the ball.
When they're swinging it out to River Craycraft.
Yeah, exactly. But Jeff Wilson's playing well too for the Dolphins. On the other side, you got Christian McCaffrey, 18.5 fantasy points, 50.5 rushing yards for CMC. He's been a little limited with a knee this week. He hasn't scored a touchdown in the past few weeks. His yardage output has been low as well. Miami allowing the 11th fewest fantasy points to running backs at 18.9 per game. But Elijah Mitchell is now out again. So does that mean more touches are coming to McCaffrey's way?
I think if he was fully healthy, sure, but I don't think he's going to be. Chances are he probably plays in this game, but I wouldn't be surprising if he's on a snap count. And like you said, I mean, 32, 39, 38 rushing yards in his last 3 games. He did have that big game against the Rams in week 8, but prior to that, 38 rushing yards again in his first game with the 49ers. That was against KC. So yeah, it hasn't really been pretty. Like the numbers have actually been worse for McCaffrey since coming over from Carolina. They've had trouble getting him going on the ground. He's been doing his thing as usual as a pass catcher, and really that's where he's so valuable. But no, this with the injury situation, I got to go less here.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, as you brought up those yardage, especially with the 50.5, he hasn't had more than 40 in over a month. So I think he's banged up to get to that number, and they don't want to run him that much. So
I agree.
How about a pick in this one? San Francisco, the line is shifted to 3.5. I'm taking the Dolphins. They're too hot right now.
I'm trying to will the Dolphins to win this game. I just have an affinity for teal teams in the state of Florida, I guess. But I think it'd be more fun if the Dolphins won. I feel like everybody thinks San Francisco's defense is going to just kind of put an end to this cute little Dolphins offense. But I think the Dolphins are incredibly well schemed, incredibly confident. I think they think they're winning this game. And like I said, San Francisco just hasn't played very many good offenses this season. So yes, going from playing the Texans last week to the 49ers defense this week, that's a big jump for Miami, but it's also a big jump for that San Francisco defense that's had a really easy last month. So I like Miami too. I think Miami at least covers. Gun to my head, I think I would take San Francisco to win, but I think it's like a 30-27 type of game.
Yep. And speaking of 2 great offenses, let's head to Cincinnati. The Chiefs, Bengals going at it in that late window on Sunday. The Chiefs are favored by 2 points in this one on the road, the over-under 53. Jamar Chase should be back. I don't know if we have a line for him yet, but we'll get to that in a minute. Joe Burrow, though, 278.5 passing yards. He's reached 279 in 5 of 11, 2 games versus Kansas City last year. He had 446 in that regular season matchup, 250 in the playoffs. KC ranks in the bottom half of the league when it comes to passing yards allowed. And we still don't know about Joe Mixon's status either yet heading into this one for sure. So what do you think about Burrow on Sunday?
Yeah, I think we got to go more here by default. If you like the Bengals to win this game as underdogs at home, you got to imagine they're doing it with Joe Burrow slinging the ball around. Like you said, we'll wait and see on Mixon. It's been mostly positive news for him. I would imagine he plays, but still was limited on Thursday. I will say on Jamar Chase, I would, whenever that prop comes out, I would go less on Chase. Some of the comments from him were a little concerning, not in terms of like long-term or anything like that, but just for this week. He said, yeah, I'm hoping I can get some reps on Sunday. It didn't really sound like a guy who expects to be out there at 100% capacity. I think he'll play. I think he'll have an impact, but I don't think he's going to see his normal snap count. So I would be cautious when it comes to Jamar Chase, but we've also seen the Cincinnati offense play really well over the last couple of weeks without him. I mean, T. Higgins looks like he'd be a number 1 guy for half of the league right now. So even if Chase isn't quite himself, I think Cincinnati can hang around in this game. And at the very least, Joe Burrow can have a big day. I think he's going to need to. I mean, to keep up with Kansas City, Joe Burrow probably needs to go for 300 plus yards.
And how about Patrick Mahomes? 319 and a half passing yards. This is more or less just a gaudy number. He's hit the more on this in 7 of 11 games this season, including each of the last 6. Cincinnati just average against the pass. But last year they kept him below 300 yards in both games that they played. Can Mahomes keep it rolling and make it 7 straight games with 320 or more yards?
I think he can. I really do. I know Cincinnati, has schemed better for Patrick Mahomes than really any other team, I think, in those 2 games last year. But it's really tough to do that 3 times in a row. Obviously, if you're the Chiefs, you're studying every piece of that tape and saying, all right, we need to be prepared if they bring these looks at us again. I think they will be. And this whole season to me has kind of felt like a Patrick Mahomes kind of not revenge tour, but basically reminding everybody that he's the best quarterback in the league, which I think he is. And I think Joe Burrow's somewhat on his corner. Obviously, he beat him twice in the span of a month, including in the playoffs last year. So again, I think Patrick Mahomes at this point is he's kind of above the revenge narrative, but I think this is a game that he really, really wants to win, kind of a prove it type of game for the Chiefs. It reminds me of the Buffalo Bills earlier this season coming to Arrowhead and beating the Chiefs. You just knew the Bills were winning that game. They cared way more about it. They needed it for their confidence. And look, again, Kansas City kind of feels like they're above that at this point, but this is a game that I just don't see Mahomes letting them lose.
Yeah, I was listening to some national sports talk this week, and it's like a lot of people are kind of making the case now that Patrick Mahomes is entering that like LeBron, Mike Trout like realm where
I agree.
Where it's like, no, we already know he's the best guy, so we're just not going to give him the MVP this year. But he should be
100%.
I think hands down, he's been the best player in football.
Yeah, no question. And look, there are a ton of elite quarterbacks right now. Like, I love Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is going to win multiple Super Bowls over the course of his career. He's not Mahomes. Mahomes is on his own level.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. How about Travis Kelce? 6.5 receptions. He's had 7 catches or more in 5 of 11 games, but he hasn't gotten to this number in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, they've kind of had some trouble connecting with Kelce, especially in the red zone. It's been a little clunky the last couple of weeks. I mean, he was targeted on the interception in the end zone against the Rams. He had a couple others where they just weren't on the same page. He's the number 1 tight end in fantasy by a mile. He has like 100 more fantasy points than Mark Andrews, who's number 2. That gap could be way larger if you watch these games. Like, Kelce feels like he plays really well every week, but like he could have like 30 more yards and another score every week. If he connected every time with Mahomes in the red zone. So at some point they're going to get that sorted out, but I don't know if it happens this week. I mean, he had a big game in the playoffs against Cincinnati, did not have a big game at the end of the regular season. Since he did a good job defensively of containing Travis Kelce. And like you said, kind of a concerning trend these last few weeks, not going over this number. So, it feels like we've been going with too many mores on this show. I'll go less on Kelce.
I'll give you one more. T. Higgins, 73.5 receiving yards.
Ooh,
more. Does that Jamar Chase's status impact that one way or another?
Unless we find out that Chase is 100% healthy and is going to play his normal snaps, no, not really.
Okay, fair enough. And the Chiefs favored by 2 on the road. How about a pick?
I like the Chiefs. I really do. Maybe I'm just giving too much love to Patrick Mahomes. I certainly have a ton of respect for Burrow and the Bengals, but really tough to beat a team like the Chiefs 3 times in a row. I think we get something like Chiefs 29, Bengals 23.
I'll take Cincinnati just because I can't agree with you on everything. I gotta, just go away from me on one pick. Give me the Bengals at home. I like the way they played last week, so they'll keep it rolling. Chiefs are due to lose at some point here as well. Sunday night game. I really don't want to get into this game at all. I feel like there must be a rule somewhere in like the league headquarters that if the Dallas Cowboys have a winning record, we cannot boot them from prime time, no matter who they're playing. Any thoughts on this? Just what's probably going to be a snoozer.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's just really frustrating because there's 2 monster games in the late window that like one of which could have so easily been flexed here. But like you said, it is the Cowboys, and I don't know who they'd have to play, like the Texans, I guess, to really be flexed out of this window. I know the number for Dak is 250.5 through the air. I think I'd go less on that. It's just high enough. I mean, that the Indy defense, like I can't decide if they're good. Like I think they're good. Most weeks they've been good. They didn't look great against Kenny Pickett this last week. I thought Pittsburgh ran the ball pretty effectively. Dallas should be able to follow that same script. And, Jonathan Taylor, 75.5 rushing yards. I'd go less on that. I mean, this Colts offensive line to me has really deteriorated over the last year or two. We were talking about them as maybe the best line in the league not that long ago. And they can't hold up. They really can't. I mean, other than Quentin Nelson, it's just kind of a unit that seems like time has passed it by. So yet again, it feels like this is a really good spot for that Dallas defensive line.
Yeah, I think the one number I like in this one, give me Tony Pollard more than 13.5 fantasy points. I think he catches one out of the backfield, which is going to eat up over half of that.
Yeah, I can see that. He was quiet last week. Feels like he's due to erupt again.
So, yep. All right, very good. That's going to do it for us this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight, and good luck in your contest this week.